Welcome back to the Wildly Satisfied Way and the Wildly Satisfied Media platform. I'm your host, Taylor Davis. And in this episode, I'm going to talk a lot about the missing phase that we have that causes collapse and recovery, it causes burnout, and destabilizes a lot of our lives, our businesses. And this is going to be a little bit more business focused, but I'm going to bring in the aspects we've already talked about when it comes to the collapse and recovery cycle and burnout. And you know, if you don't know a lot about me, and by the way, you're going to hear me like drinking from my coffee cup because I've just definitely needed some coffee for this, but I'm all about nourishment. And I want you to know, like, as you're listening to this, as you're getting to know me, I'm not above you. I'm not different from you. I might have more knowledge on something with you, but this is a conversation. And I want you to know that I am speaking directly to you as if we are in my living room on my couch, which if you're watching this video wise, you can see that I'm on my couch. And I want to invite you into the space to have this conversation, to ask questions, to get curious, because I am not about gatekeeping here. I have a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, and a lot of things that I've done. So let me help you build businesses that are satisfying, successful, and sustainable. And same with your lifestyle. And let's change the conversation in our culture about what life and business should be. That's what I am here for. So in this episode, and in the previous episodes, we talked about the collapse and recovery cycle. We talked about not living lives we have to recover from. We've talked about, the addiction to chaos. And so those themes are going to come up in this episode. But one thing I want to focus on, because no one talks about this, literally no one, is that we often skip a very crucial phase, which puts us back into survival when we collapse over and over again. And in businesses, this happens a lot because with the obsession of more, faster, better, scaling, especially scaling, often that is not something that we need in this portion of the business or the lifestyle journey that we're on. Scaling is great, expanding more, building more, bringing more in when you've reached a certain point. But so many people come to me, especially in their like solopreneur, they're just starting, or they've been going pretty good for like a year and they've got quote unquote consistent income. And they're like, now I want to scale to more income. And I'm like, that's not what scaling is. Revenue and income is a byproduct of sustainability, not scaling. So what I really want to talk about today is this cycle that I've mapped out from working with clients that contribute to and is connected to the addiction to chaos, connected to the collapse and recovery cycle. And I'm just going to walk you through it really simply. So when I have a client and they're like, oh my God, this is taking so long, or I want to scale, I want to do all these things. I'm like, okay, well, have you stabilized? And they look at me like I'm insane and they've never heard this before. And I go, this is the cycle of what it looks like. It's, if I was going to be like a circle, right? It's going to be like clarify, then destabilize, then expand, or simplify, stabilize, scale, simplify, stabilize, scale, clarify, stabilize, expand. And it's a circle, not a line. Let's get out of this idea that this is a linear path. We are not linear beings. There is nothing linear in this world. Everything lives in cycles. Hence the feminine business, hence the feminine way. Nature, everything is cyclical. Throw out linear thinking, please. We live in cycles. We live in seasons. We live in times where we have to understand that our client journeys, our own cycles, how we build our business sustainably is leaning back into what observationally we can see the way the world works. Everything has seasons. Our world operates seasonally, cyclically, in certain patterns and rituals and routines and rhythms. It has that essence to it. So hierarchy, linear thinking, these very masculine approaches, they're not sustainable. That's why we have so many systems that are breaking down. So when you think about your business, when we think about, collapse and recovery cycles, it's often because, and this goes for business too, I'll show you that in a second. It's often because we go from, I'm in a clarification phase to I'm jumping straight to expand. I'm in the simplification phase and I'm in the simplification phase and I am jumping to let's scale this bitch. Like that is not sustainable. what happens, and I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, I have been researching this for years, is that the people who do that, they skip the stabilization phase. That's when they're scaling and they start scaling problems, dysfunction, and then everything breaks down, it burns down, and they have to begin again. They fire their team, they start over, they might have to go through a recovery of like their physical health, their mental health. It's because that stabilization phase was not solidified. So clarify, stabilize, expand over and over and over again. And in clarification stage, you have to be able to look at your business and your life and go, okay, well, is this me? Intuitively, am I clarifying who I am, what I do, what I want in this season of my life, what I want in the next couple of years, what turns me on, the desire, the freedom? Remember, feminine-based business is all about freedom first. So I'm going to take you through another framework that I have. But you look at the vision. So this is part of the framework. It's the vision of how you want to feel in your life, how you want to live your life. That's what I call a turn on vision, because it turns you on so much that your energy is on, you are for it, and you're like, let's fucking go. And then from there, you create goals, you create, all these things. The second part is your intuitive strategy. So your intuitive strategy is your sustainable strategy for how you operate in your life. This is something that I hone in on a lot with businesses and individuals. This is why I partially love human design. Intuitive strategy is not human design. It's just that human design is a great tool to figure out what that is. And it's a term I've coined for years, been using it. And so you have your turn on vision that's pulling you forward. It's based in how do I want to feel? What would feel free? What is, oh my God, what would feel free versus what would feel safe? Or what do I need to build in order to get out of this survival mode? Like, that's a masculine perspective. Masculine perspectives are survival, security, safety. It's mainly safety. They're supposed to be when they're healthy. The healthy masculine energy is safety. But when it's unhealthy or it's dysregulated, it can go into security, and people confuse those two. A friend of mine told me the difference is, and I've never forgotten this, there's a difference between safety and security. Safety is, are you safe right now in this present moment? Security is you trying to find safety in the future. So masculine-wise, so much of business is built from the masculine lens and an unhealthy masculine lens of only security. Then we build businesses that don't feel good. We don't want to show up in them, and then we want to burn them down again. Or we're like, oh wow, we spent the last 20 years of our life, and what do I have to show for it? I mean, I've got money, but I'm not happy. Hence, no satisfaction or sustainability in success. So something that I always say is the feminine sets the standard, the masculine leads from it. That has been a core tenet of my work for years. And when you build businesses, you build them from the feminine perspective. So feminine first, the feminine sets the standard. How do you want to feel? What do you desire? What does freedom feel like? You're building from a freedom-based perspective, because your energy, your body, and quantum physics tells us this, we need to feel a certain way. Feeling is what creates our reality, not what we think. And so when you're looking at your life and your business, how do you want to feel? Let your feminine energy, which is just your emotions, it's freedom. The feminine is the epitome of freedom and it seeks safety. The masculine is the epitome of safety and it seeks freedom. When the freedom energy sets the standard, you're like, yes, that is my standard in life. Amazing. Okay. That's where the turn on vision comes from. And then from there, you have your goals, that's where your masculine can come in. Use systems, that's where your masculine can come in, right? So it's the turn on vision. And then you go to your intuitive strategy. Your intuitive strategy is how you operate naturally. You're just like everything in nature. Everything in nature, everything in the universe has one purpose: to create and continue life, create and evolve in whatever way it wants to go. And it doesn't mean like life as in like babies. It can be life as in like creative life force energy. You are no different. But everything in life has a purpose for that, has a function for that purpose, and yet we think we are different as human beings. So if you know that when you were born, you had a blueprint that you were meant to come in during this time of your life, and you had this intuitive way of being, this intuitive strategy that if you had not had any trauma or chaos come in, or anyone coming to you and going, oh yeah, well, you're wrong for being this way, or hey, don't lean into this, or no, this is bad, you shouldn't do this, and you get shamed and traumatized, you would have just operated in your intuitive strategy, which would have naturally had success and sustainability and satisfaction built in. Then we have to decondition all of the pain and trauma, etc. So that intuitive strategy can be applied to business. And it honestly, it pokes through whether or not we have trauma, because we keep returning to ourselves over and over and over again. And that intuitive strategy is where you can really build clarification and stabilization in those two parts of the cyclical client journey, or the cyclical journey, inside of just the business journey. And so your intuitive strategy, if you know how you operate intuitively, not some guru, not someone else who had this performance, nothing. If you know how you operate intuitively, it shows you how you can have easier success and satisfaction in your sales process, in how you show up in your business, in what you're talking about, whatever it is, in your life, in your relationships. You're not trying to be somebody else. And so your intuitive strategy allows you to just operate from who you are intuitively underneath the trauma, and not work so fucking hard when you don't need to, when you have natural gifts and ways of being. So there's the turn on vision, then there's the intuitive strategy. After that, it's pleasurable processes, because if it's not pleasurable, it's not sustainable. Why are we wasting willpower and just energy in general trying to force ourselves into things that aren't intuitively how we operate? Yes, we can challenge ourselves. Yes, we can try new things. Yes, we can build on. Pleasure is not the absence of challenge, okay? But we don't need to be wasting all of this time and energy building businesses and lifestyles that cause collapse and recovery, that are based on trauma, that are not based on how we operate. And we can make showing up inside of it more pleasurable. So it doesn't require as much discipline as they're telling us that we need. You know, when they have the rhetoric that comes out of like, well, you just need to show up and do it. You just need to push yourself through it. Just push, push, push and grind. I'm like, or I can just choose a path that has the least resistance. Like, resistance will come and challenge will come from me doing something worthwhile versus me setting up a process that is not pleasurable to me. I'm not saying that we're not going to have resistance. I'm not saying that we're not going to be challenged, that we don't need to push ourselves. I'm just saying that maybe we don't need to make it harder than it has to be in the areas where it doesn't have to be so fucking hard. Like, it's just wasted energy. So let's efficiently and effectively put together processes, strategies, and systems that support us at our optimal level, where we don't have to push through to create performance and to burn ourselves out and then to go into collapse and recovery again. Remember, we do want to push our edge. We do want to challenge ourselves, but we don't want to push ourselves off the edge, because we're operating in someone else's way of being that's just not sustainable for us. You're going to hear me talk about this so much, because it's such a profound part of my life and my own journey. And so that's 3 parts, the 5-part framework for Wildly Satisfied. It's your turn on vision, and then it's your intuitive strategy, it's your pleasurable processes, and then it's the conversations that you're having. That's number 4. What are you creating? What are you putting out into the world? And then number 5 is your community. And it's like, what community are you creating? What culture are you creating? So this is obviously a very large framework that can be applied to so many different things in business and life. But when it comes to the collapse and recovery, the addiction to chaos, we're going to return to that clarify, stabilize, expand. In the clarification phase, when you're wanting to move out of this addiction to chaos, when you're not wanting to be in collapse and recovery anymore, you're not wanting to be in survival, and you want to build something sustainably, you need to get really honest about, where you're not showing up, and be clear, clarify, right? Clarification stage. What works for you? This goes back to your intuitive strategy and your turn on vision. What do you want? What do you desire? How do you want to feel? Turn on vision. What's the impossible goal and the thing that's really going to push you to do that and edge you, but not completely blow out your nervous system? And then clarification. What's your intuitive strategy? How do you operate? Can we honor you? Can we honor your body? Can we honor the fact that you're a feminine entrepreneur, not a masculine entrepreneur, but we can still honor the masculine inside of us as well? Can we honor all of these things instead of making us wrong and shoving us into systems and processes and ways that just don't work for everybody? We are moving into the satisfaction economy. I'm going to be talking about this a lot. We are also moving into individualization and customization. not only in businesses, but just in the systems that we have that better humanity. We've tried the one size fits all. If you're into human design, that's very much because we were in generators leading the world, and now we're moving into the era of the projector, and the projector sees the other, creates systems or update systems or burn the systems down and create a new one that works for the betterment of all types. And so while we are moving into this and we are clarifying customized systems and honoring how we operate intuitively, which is why so much of my business is around this. I'm a 4/6 splenic projector in human design. This is how we create long-term sustainability, because one size fits all does not work. We have hundreds of years, decades to prove this. So we're leaning into more customization, systems that speak more to different people at different stages in their life, different ages, different ethnicities, different cultures, and it's beautiful because that's going to create so much flexibility and sustainability long term. If we are going to build sustainable systems and businesses that we actually want to show up in, and we're not going to collapse and recover every 2 years, and we're going to just exit out and opt out of that system, what we're going to need to do is understand how we operate intuitively to build a more foundational structure that holds us in the stabilization and the scaling phase of our business. And it's great because, so many people want to talk about scaling. Scaling is really big right now. We have all these conversations about them. And actually, Benjamin Hardy has this amazing book. I'm going to do a whole video on it. It's releasing in a couple of months, called The Science of Scaling. Because people are obsessed with more and scaling, but they forget about the stabilization phase. So we have all these solopreneurs and entrepreneurs that are in the solopreneur phase, which, by the way, I have a free quiz, feminine entrepreneurship quiz. Anybody can take it. Completely free. It'll tell you in what phase you're in and what archetype you are on the journey. But we have so many people in this first phase of solopreneurship versus being like a CEO and a thought leader that are going for solopreneurship and they're trying to scale and they haven't clarified or stabilized. And so when you're looking at your business, we have all these people that are obsessed with scaling. I want you to get obsessed with stabilizing, clarifying and stabilizing. Clarification does not take that long. You just need to know how you operate intuitively. I really invite you to lean into human design because, it's just super effective. And I've used it with so many clients that I'm like, yeah, no, this makes sense. Here's a pattern for how projectors and 4/6 projectors and generators work and things like that, plus your channels and your gates and your gifts. It's just helpful. Saves a lot of time and energy. But you can create a lot of sustainability. So clarification in that phase, we need to clarify what works for us. So when I when I help people build businesses or shifting in their business, they might be a CEO or a thought leader and they're like, something feels off. I've built $1 million businesses, but I feel like I'm going to just start over again. I don't want to burn everything down again. So whether it's a solopreneur, a CEO, or a thought leader, what I go and do is I look at them and I go, okay, what's the foundation? What is your foundation built on? Because if you built your foundation on masculine energy as a feminine core individual, and I'm not talking about this because I'm a female-bodied individual, I mean a feminine core. If you are 80% feminine, 20% masculine, and you have built a business on masculine structures, it is going to burn you out eventually. So what I like to do is I have multiple parts that come into this foundation, and I talk about this a lot in my feminine business school and my feminine business blueprint. This foundation is, are you a feminine or masculine entrepreneur? Okay, clarify that. Are you a female-bodied or a male-bodied individual? Because your hormones and your endocrine system and the way your brain works does matter. It's not about, because it has nothing to do with the binary conversation or gender. It's just because our bodies operate differently. So if I am working with a man, his foundation is going to be different if he is a male-bodied individual versus if I work with a woman, a female-bodied individual. I'm going to interchangeably use those. I'm not perfect. But if I work with a female-bodied individual, her month looks very different than a male-bodied individual. And right now, the blueprint we have for business is based on masculine and male energy and male-bodied individuals. So we need to start shifting that. That's a big reason why Wildly Satisfied as a media platform, I want it to be a go-to place for women to be able to come and learn how we do business differently and how other cultures live life more satisfactorily. And it's just we need more wealth in the hands of women and in the hands of people who know what they're doing with it. And we need more ideas of what this looks like versus just the one way. And so I love being able to show different strategies and systems and approaches and customizing it to you. So this foundation, it's okay, Female bodied or male bodied? Masculine core or feminine core? Amazing. What's your human design as well? There's aspects all on top of that that go into that foundation, but when you start adding these things together and you solidify it, it creates a more sustainable foundation for how you operate. So not only are you clarified in that and clarified in what your body of work is in the world, because I don't tell people to niche down or anything like that. I have a whole different thing about like umbrella up, but the body of work that you're in the world and looking at what that is versus just what this business is and this modality that you teach. When you have this clarified foundation of your turn on vision, your intuitive strategy, what's pleasurable to you, right? All of these different things, that solidifies. So that way, when you want to scale, you have a stable foundation to build from. You cannot build a business, a building. Let's just go into like a physical structure. You cannot build a house or a building if the foundation is not stabilized. And yet nobody is talking about this. Nobody is telling you, hey, maybe we should actually have a phase of your business where we stabilize what's going on. Not more, not let's try different things. Let's solidify what works. Let's tweak what doesn't. Let's make sure we have the different ecosystem revenue streams. Let's have the ways that we create connections with our people. There's so much into this. And so in the clarification stage, you want to make sure that you clarify what those things are. And then you're going to go out and you're going to test. You're going to put out things. You're going to refine. You're going to figure out what your strengths are and what you actually want to do in your business and the different offers that work. And you're going to put out an offer and it might flop. Or you're going to put out another offer and you'll be like, oh, that was great. And I actually love showing up in that more. Amazing. And then you'll start building your offer ecosystem. And then from that offer ecosystem, we go, okay, cool. How do we streamline this? And this is the stabilization phase. So we've stabilized partially because we have that foundation we clarified, right? And we make sure that we're operating in this. This is where like the strategy comes in for how you market. It comes in like with your pleasurable processes, because pleasurable processes is how you're going to show up in your business day to day, your life day to day. We don't need more friction in how we show up. If you make it pleasurable, you'll want to show up for it. It's not that hard. And so when you are looking at your business and in the stabilization phase, you get to go and refine this. You get to input systems. And you know, there is one thing that I forgot to talk about. It's standards. And so the standards, the systems, and the support, standard, system, support, those three things are really important. So you got to clarify what systems you need now that you've clarified, you know, how your business is running and you went and tried out different offers and your languaging and who you are. And then you stabilize with systems that support you because they need to be how you operate intuitively and you want to have to show up in them. That's pleasurable processes, but you need to refine those systems so they're not always operating, not also always requiring you to operate. I actually just had a conversation with someone recently about systems and they're like, well, yeah, but then I have this habit stack on top of this. And I'm like, that's a process. Habits are processes. But when habits come together and then you can automate what's possible, then you can have a system that holds you even when you're not showing up in it. Because I love systems, but like systems need to be as automated as possible, as frictionless as possible. Because if you have to constantly show up in them, and it requires you all the time, that's a lot of manual work. That's a lot of energy that you're using. And then what happens on the days where you don't have that energy? That system might fall apart. So where can we lean into that sustainability aspect of systems? So all of this to say, these pieces of focusing on the stabilization and being like, oh wow, revenue's coming in from multiple streams, not just one high ticket coaching offer or whatever somebody told you. Oh wow, I have different areas that are nourishing me. Oh wow, my wellness is nourishing me from overflow, not recovery, not that type of collapse and recovery approach. And you start really looking at the systems that you have in place, the standards that you have that you clarified that are now holding and being tested, and you are holding the line so that you don't have leaky energy. And then you have the support of the people that work with you, or the support of the, you know, whether it's like, oh, I use, what's it called? Instacart. That's a support system. Or I have a person who works with me and they support me here. It's your team, it's your partner, it's whatever it is, right? And you put those things into place and it helps you create a more sustainable baseline and foundation. So when you decide to scale, you're not jumping from clarify to expand. You're going through the process of clarify, stabilize, expand. And then once you've expanded and you scaled, you're like, oh my God, but now I want to go to this level. Cool. Clarify, stabilize, expand over and over and over again. And then it can be simplify, stabilize, scale. Usually in the first round or two, when you've really stabilized and you're making great money and you're like not in any type of like survival mode anymore, it's going to shift to simplify, stabilize, scale, simplify, stabilize, scale. But clarify, stabilize, expand over and over and over again. And when it comes to like how this has shown up in my life, when I really looked at, I don't want to live a life I have to recover from. When I came back from Bali and I clarified where I had leaky energy, where I wasn't operating intuitively, where, those things kind of, they snuck in as they do. Having mechanisms in place to be able to check in, having nourishment systems in place so I'm not recovering all the time or having to think about how to put those things in place, because if I have to think about it, it's not a system. It's just like that's too much energy. There's decision fatigue, there's context switching, there's a lot of things that drain you. And so it creates more chaos because then you are required to do something inside of the system and it's just taking too much energy. And then when you collapse, the system collapses. And you just got to have an intuitive system with like an automated system as much as possible so that you can actually scale from that. And there's also a lot of noise inside systems, as just a side note, but when you think about to scale and everything, there's a lot of, sometimes the system gets bloated and you need to cut some things out that you're like, oh, actually, I don't need that. What seasonally in this season of your life do you need to put in place to nourish yourself, to create that stability so that way later you can expand? And then, okay, amazing. In a different season of your life, you might require a little bit different of a system, because seasonally recalibrating is really helpful. That's why I do seasonal recalibration labs, because it's like, cool, we go through seasons. We're cyclical beings, regardless if we're female-bodied or male-bodied. We are cyclical beings. That is the blueprint for life. It is not the exception to the rule. So with the collapse and recovery cycle and what I've gone through since Bali is I realized how much that missing phase of stabilization, I fell into maintenance mode versus stabilization. And so, I'd get the clients and I would work with the clients, but then I wouldn't really be thinking about, well, what is in place for me to get more clients in or leads or anything like that. And so, by the way, I'm going to say connections versus leads. Something in my feminine business blueprint that I talk a lot about and just something I live by is words matter. And I've never felt great about a lot of the words that the masculine uses of like lead generation or, something like that. I'm like, you're not a lead, you're a person. So I don't say lead generation, although it slips in because I've been trained with marketing. But lead generation for me, I say connection creation. So how many connections have we made this week? How deep is the connection? And this goes to like client journeys and things like that. And so, the connections, I didn't have the best systems in place for creating those connections and deepening the connections. And I didn't look at it and go, wow, I need an ecosystem that runs without me. I was just in the service industry, showing up as a consultant on the back end, and I was in retainer mode, which retainer mode is not always great when you have to show up every single day in the back end of somebody's business as their right hand. So I had to tweak a lot of those things. Now I do, I have like a hidden offer where I'm an interim COO. So if you have something where like you're a COO and you're in the CEO phase of your business, if you go take that feminine entrepreneurship quiz, if you're the CEO of your business, but you're still operating and you're like, your team is coming to you for all these things and you're like, why? I just want to go focus on what I want to go focus on. Usually what happens is you got to figure out what the KPIs are. You got to figure out what needs to be put in place, what systems are not in place, what education is not in place so that your team can be self-managing and self-sustaining. So, I looked at basically with that offer, the interim COO, basically, with that offer, as the interim COO, I come in, figure out what those things are, and then you can hire a COO to take over the systems. And so that's one of the things where when I was looking at it, when I came back, I was like, I can't be in someone's business for years on end. So I shifted that to be a little bit more projector friendly and intuitive based on my intuitive strategy. I also have a defined root center in human design. And I went, oh, I need bursts of energy. I need a beginning and an end container. And I need to be able to be like, okay, cool. Now I can get in there, do my thing, get out. That's also really great for projectors as a strategy, just FYI. And so I shifted my business offers to just operationally be different. I wasn't an never ending, okay, we're going to do this for like a year or 6 months or 12 months. It's like, no, I come in for 4 months. If for some reason we need to assess, I look at it and I'm like, cool, let's go. It'll be another 4-month contract and then it ends, because I don't stick around after that, not because I don't want to, but because that COO version needs to be finished during that time. So you look at your offers, you look at your ecosystem if you even have one. I highly recommend having an ecosystem. You set up multiple revenue streams and you start building a stabilization in different ways. And when I returned from Bali, I realized how much I did not have that. I was leaning into my human design and my intuitive strategy in a lot of different ways, but there was some core pivotal things where I was still running on generator strategies or what someone else told me, and I didn't realize how much it was draining me. So I would go into collapse and recovery. And then if I wouldn't feel needed because my fixer side was coming out, then I would create more chaos and then I would collapse again and again. And I would build bitterness and resentment for the experience, even though I loved the people that I was working with, because I just didn't have the energy to sustain it. So I'm really going to invite you to look at where in this process of like clarify, stabilize, expand, where have you approached business maybe from a more masculine perspective or a male-bodied perspective? Where have you skipped the stabilization phase entirely? Because if you skip that stabilization phase, you are going to end up in collapse and recovery, because that's just, you have to stabilize. You have to stabilize. It's kind of like if you look at, this is a really offhanded example, but if you look at, you're in a relationship with somebody, you have your partner, right? In the clarification stage, you're getting to know each other. It's honeymoon, the first year or two, maybe, you're getting to know each other. It's just all the fun stuff and everything. And then you go through some of the hard times and you test things out and you get challenged by life. And it's like, okay, well, are we going to stabilize or are we going to break? Are we going to stabilize or are we going to collapse? And that's whether or not a relationship collapses, or do you have a stable foundation? Some people go from clarification to I'm going to have babies in the expansion phase, and then it's turmoil and pain. Now, this is not everybody. Of course, this is not everybody, but it's just an example. It's, a little bit more to show what I mean by this. And then you might have to go back and stabilize because you expanded too fast. So I just invite you to look at, where have you been skipping a step? Where have you clarified, but actually not really clarified to the degree of what you need to create that stabilization long term? Where in your business do you need support and guidance to be able to do that? Where have you been operating against your own intuitive strategy? And where have you been somewhat addicted to chaos because that was where you felt needed and valued, even though you just desired peace? I, for one, had that a lot. Definitely a lot. And, the standards and systems and support that you have, that's what's going to build a sustainable business. Having these things in place is going to build that sustainability long term. I really like to focus with people on the, stability phase, because everybody wants to focus on scaling, because scaling is sexy. More is better. It's like more money, more this. It's like, okay, but if you have more money and your nervous system can't withhold the responsibility of it, if you do not have capacity to hold the number of people that are going to come in and work with you, if you scale, the traffic that's going to come in, the connections, right, leads, the number of clients that want to work with you, if you don't have the ecosystem in place, if you don't have the different mechanisms in your business or in your life, you will break. And then you'll revert back and go into collapse and recovery again, and then you'll want to rebuild it back again. If you personally, as a CEO, as a solopreneur, if you are trying to scale and you haven't looked at, well, where have I stabilized mentally, physically? Is my wellness, is my nourishment? Do I have systems in my day-to-day life to keep me nourished? Then you're going to end up in collapse and recovery. I know somebody who is a perfect example of this. She talks about it, and you're actually going to watch the episodes in this season with Jenna Kennedy. She made millions, and it's a perfect example of not being happy and having those things in your life where you're like, what actually makes me happy? What actually nourishes me? Not what's the arbitrary, I'm getting my nails done and I'm going to massages because someone told me I need those to recover, like what I was doing. It's what actually nourishes me. It's a really beautiful conversation she and I have, because, she talks about how she got into happiness and learning what really happens in the brain and how that changed. And she had, a multi-million-dollar business, and she burned it all down. But that stabilization phase means that she can build it back better. It means that so many other people can build it back better. But it required a collapse and recovery cycle to be able to do it. And I, for one, do not want our culture to be constantly collapsing and recovering. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. So if you're not for that, opt in, like, let's go, because the satisfaction economy is coming, and I, for one, am fucking ready for it. So if that's you, like, leave me a comment. Tell me what you hear about this. Like, what's resonating for you? What's really come up? Where have you maybe skipped the stabilization phase? Have you ever heard this before? I want to hear everything. Please go for it. You are not a bother. Your questions come in, and I love them. There's actually a form. There should be a form in the description, which you can add questions in, or you can go to the Ask Taylor form on my website on wildlysatisfiedmedia.com. You can DM me on Instagram at wildlyintuitive or at wildlysatisfied, and let's have this conversation, because if we're going to change the system going forward, if we're going to build satisfaction and sustainability and success, we need to build stability in how we operate intuitively. We need to honor our bodies, honor what's right for us, and build from that, not from someone else's idea of what business is or what life is. Because if you're not wildly satisfied, like, what's the fucking point? What's the fucking point?